Around 2 weeks ago, Markiplier would post this video onto his channel, amassing millions of views, but also reintroducing Iron Lung back to the public eye. If you don't remember or haven't heard of this game before, this was a pixelated horror game that was released in March 10th, 2022. Well, to call it just horror doesn't sit right with me. The official definition of horror, according to the Oxford Language Dictionary, states it as an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. The games that most qualify under this specific genre are things such as Amnesia, Outlast, FNAF, and a game that not a lot of people associate with horror, Subnautica. Now, the first three have generally similar concepts, though the actual stories have nothing to do with each other. The reason why these are all effective horror games are due to one main factor, and it isn't due to their jump scares, atmosphere, or even their lore. It's the fact that you are always helpless. The reason why these games are so scary is due to you, the player, being unable to fight back against the creatures within the games. All you could do is either run, hide, or lock yourself within a room. That is why, personally, I don't find any games where you could attack or even kill the enemies that scary. That's not to say that games you could do that in don't have terrifying moments, just that I don't believe they are quite as effective as others within this genre. The horror genre itself is pretty diverse, but there is a specific extension of this genre: psychological horror. These types of games, movies, TV shows, or any other media using psychological horror will target a person's mental state. Others may use cheap jump scares, loud sounds, gore, anything physical to scare you, but it is what we ourselves create in our own minds that truly is the scariest thing out there. Before we begin talking about the gameplay and lore of Iron Lung, let's focus on a real fear people have. This is something we are all born with, no matter how much you try to hide it: the irrational fear of the unknown. This fear branches out far more than what people think. It starts in childhood, the fear of what's in your closet, the fear of what's in the dark, the fear of the stranger who walks too close to you. Growing up, these quote-unquote childish fears will disappear. At least we want them to, but they will always be there. The thing that I get afraid of quite often is the ocean. Not of swimming or the ocean itself, but rather just how deep it can go. Thinking about how small you really are compared to the seemingly infinite depths of the ocean is terrifying. What's worse? The fact that less than 10% of the ocean's depths have been explored, so we don't even know what's near the bottom at all. From what we could tell, nearly every single deep-sea creature that we have discovered seems to be almost alien-like. With a lot of these species we don't really know anything about other than what they look like, since they are so deep within the ocean. So, how does one game decide to take the concept of these kinds of fears and turn them into a playable experience? This is how Iron Lung is somehow one of the most terrifying games to exist, and why I hate it so much. Starting this game up, we learn the existence of this incident called the Quiet Rapture. It is unexplained what caused it, but what we do know is that every habitable planet just disappeared for some reason. The only people to survive were those within space stations or starships. Everything is crumbling, supplies are running out, so when they discover a moon that had a strange anomaly on it, they decided to gravitate towards it. This anomaly being a sea of blood. The player is introduced as a convict who is told to explore this ocean within a makeshift submarine nicknamed the Iron Lung. This submarine wasn't designed to go into those depths, so the hatch will be welded shut with the window sealed, so no water can slip inside, effectively making us trapped and unable to see anything. We then wake up within a rusty submarine inside of the ocean, with this person on the radio explaining this to us.
Cruising depth in roughly 40 seconds. Stand by. I'm seeing some voltage irregularities in the instruments, so keep an eye out for sparks or flames or anything like that. Approaching maximum depth. The hull's feeling it, but it's still holding strong. Closing porthole shielding. We're starting to lose radio signal. You'll be at cruise depth soon, so refreshing and be careful. You're on your own.
One of the first things we could find within the submarine is a note that reads, "This is not an expedition, it's an execution. When they put you in here, they don't want you to return. And even if you do, and even if they keep their promises, what freedom waits for you? A few dying ships in a sea of dead stars?" A pretty glooming message. Continuing forward, we could find a map of where exactly we need to go, and here we would also be able to control the submarine. We have to go to certain points of interest, and when we get there, we simply have to take a picture. This is the entire game. Nothing too complicated. Like I said before, our windows are completely sealed since the submarine wasn't designed for deep sea travel, making us unable to view what is around us. At least, for the most part. The only time we could see what is around us is when we use the camera to take pictures outside, which will reveal a black and white photo. Though, this feature is used scarcely throughout the whole game, with the only time we will need to see what is around us is around certain points of interest, which are located on the map. The low resolution black and white photos are most likely used to add more realism to the game as well, since we are so deep below that no surface light can touch where we are currently. While navigating around, essentially blind to our surroundings, we could hear the submarine moving in the water, with there being a clear lack of any kind of music. This lack of any kind of music is mind-numbing. I didn't really realize this until now, but a lot of games rely on music in order to add tension to moments, and there aren't a lot that just don't use any music at all. This absence of music is so unsettling that it doesn't feel right. As if something is supposed to happen in the next scene, and when nothing does, you start to wonder, when am I going to get jump scared? Now, throughout the course of this journey, certain things will happen, such as a water leak that will start to cause the inside of the submarine to flood. There is no way to stop it, so all you will hear for the rest of the game is the constant pouring of water. It's important to note that our character is a convict, though we don't know what we did or how severe it was. However, we were promised our freedom as long as we went on this trip and completed it. It is speculated that we most likely were given a death penalty due to how we were basically sent on a death mission. Knowing this, that is why our character probably kept going on this journey even though there was a risk of dying. Along with the constant fear of the submarine sinking due to the water spilling in, there's also the sounds of something bumping into us. We don't know what it is yet, but at certain points, we hear a loud bump that can be heard, as well as our sensors picking up something following us at points when we're leaving. It is around this point when we will start to take some new photos, but now we find the skeletal remains of something. Most likely something big, though we don't know actually just how big it is compared to the submarine. It is kind of unbelievable, but perhaps something could be living within this ocean of blood. There's nothing we could do to currently check it out, so we just keep going. After a few more minutes of exploring, a fire will break out within our submarine, but thankfully we are able to put it out using a fire extinguisher. Or you could just let the fire spread and cause the whole submarine to explode. That works too, I guess. Assuming you aren't psychotic and didn't want to see your in-game character suffer in a fire, you probably were able to move on. But it seems like nothing is here. Mostly uneventful searching with some minor hiccups. Until this happens. The sensors go crazy. We take a picture to see what it is trying to warn us about and see one giant eye. Whatever it is, it roars and hits the ship before swimming away. Now we know we definitely aren't alone in these depths. This is when panic truly starts to skyrocket. Our ship has a leak, the ocean's blood reaching above our ankles, our oxygen levels are currently at an all-time low. Something just hit the submarine without us knowing if they're still close by. And the worst part? Being our knowledge that this trip most likely was something we were never meant to return from. Still, with all of that, we press further to hit one final spot where we need to take a photo again, which is when with the ending showing some lines of text telling us this expedition raised more questions than answers. Our submarine is scattered all around the bottom of the trench, looking like it was torn to pieces by some sort of beast. With no way of trying to get it out, no photos that we took could be retrieved, with a saddening message that the universe is dying, with mankind still trying to look for hope. This game is a slow burner, and it's understandable if you might find it boring as well, since most of it is just pushing buttons to get to where you need to be just to take a picture. It's the way the sounds and the subtle details of this game presents itself that makes it truly scary. We never really see what's going to attack us. Throughout the whole game, if you never played it or never seen any information about it, you'll assume that there's going to be constant jump scares or perhaps a person on the radio to talk to you in order to scare you. But that doesn't happen. One of the tags that gets associated with it is horror, so you enter this game with the thought something is going to attack you. That's what makes it evolve from a simple horror game to psychological horror. The game itself doesn't try to make you scared. You make yourself scared because of your own thoughts of what is out there trying to get you. There's also the radio in the beginning that talks to us as we are dropped into the depths. Like I said, you'll most likely believe that this radio is going to continue talking with you, but they don't. We are completely alone throughout this entire journey. That isolation is eerie. This game is not that long. It's cheap and it takes about an hour for us to complete it. For that entire hour, assuming you have headphones, all you'll be hearing is the creaking of the outside of the ocean trying to force its way into your tiny makeshift submarine. It's crudely made and constantly has issues, so you know that the submarine falling apart very much is a possibility. Within our isolation, this game takes advantage of some very common fears. Claustrophobia, from being stuck within a very small submarine with the hatchet windows sealed tight. The fear of the unknown, as we do not know and still even after beating the game, cannot know what exactly is swimming within its ocean's depths. All we could do is make theories. The fear of the ocean, as we are stuck with the noise of the water echoing around us, which is where this game draws a parallel to another game, Subnautica. These two are drastically different from their graphics, location, lore, and gameplay. One is an open world survival game, with the other being a simulation of a person getting eaten by an oversized fish. Even though the second one also could apply to Subnautica, but whatever. Subnautica's creatures are made to not only be alien-like, but be horrifying to the players, most of the time getting inspired by Lovecraft's own design of what a monster should be. If you don't know, Lovecraft has a specific philosophy of creating certain creatures. The reason why his depiction of monsters was so terrifying was due to one word, and it's a word that I used to describe what made good horror games scary: helplessness. Most of the time, when one of Lovecraft's monsters, such as his most famous creation Cthulhu, causes harm, it seems to be a product of either boredom or even just an accident. He created these cosmic gods that are so powerful that they could destroy the world in mere seconds, but just chooses not to. These beings view humans as nothing, as if we were just ants they could squash if they wanted to. This concept is terrifying, but usually really hard to implement within games. There is one effective way to try and replicate this in a different way though. Deep sea travel. Leviathans are a type of an aggressive sea monster that we encounter within Subnautica, and usually the first time anyone meets one, they will get jump scared. These creatures reside near the early stages of the game, and is quite a simple way of trying to create levels for the player. You will never have a reliable way of killing any of the predators within this game, and most of the time will need to upgrade your equipment in order to travel faster in order to avoid the more aggressive monsters. The deeper you go, the bigger the creatures you will meet, which would only make you feel even more helpless within the depths. Although these two games take the concept of sci-fi underwater horror game, their execution of these ideas are completely different. Subnautica purposely lets you see these giant masses of these leviathans to make you feel helpless inside of your tiny submarine as you go lower into the depths, sometimes even jump scaring you when these creatures attack you directly. Iron Lung, however, chooses to take a much more indirect approach, deciding to let your own imagination run wild. You are the one who will imagine just how scary the creatures are that bump into your submarine. You'll imagine what that scaly eye will belong to, and at the height of your panic, you'll look towards the back of your ship, and when you already feel helpless. I've said cheap jump scares are a boring way to implement horror, which is true, but this game doesn't just give you a cheap jump scare, it builds it up all game, a whole hour of you not getting jumped by anything, so you will never expect it to break open your submarine. That is why it is so effective. Before moving on to the next part, I just want to talk about one quick theory. This is a theory about the fish or fishes that you encounter during this journey. If you notice with the first encounter, the eye very much looks more reptilian, or even like an aquatic dragon. This is a moon that has an ocean of blood hundreds of years in the future. A dragon existing isn't that unrealistic in this universe. In the second encounter, however, the eyes of the fish are sunken in, which very much looks visibly different. So, people start to speculate that these two are completely different creatures, with the second creature most likely being some sort of anglerfish due to its facial features, mixing in mythical creatures with realistic creepy looking ones that already exist within our ocean depth. With that theory aside, this is mostly everything within the game, at least in the original release. There was an update later on, which I'll be referring to as a lore update, where a computer would be added to the submarine, where these logs would become present to add more within the story. So, this is what the logs reveal to us. Now, how this terminal works is that we go to it and type a certain word or phrase, which will reveal some documents. Typing in the name of the ship, Iron Lung, or its actual name, SM-13, will talk about how this was designed for deep liquid photography and analysis, with something redacted for some reason, while also revealing that there were rumors that the submarine and any like it were actually used to suffocate people. Most likely either criminals like us, or the undesirables within society. This, coupled with the letter found way earlier, most likely means that anyone sent out on these oceans really weren't ever made to come back. This doesn't make sense though. These oceans could be humanity's last chance at survival, so why would they use them as an excuse to silently throw people away? Continuing on, we simply search up the word blood oceans. What do we know so far about these mysterious oceans? Well, to be honest, not that much. They're an unexplained phenomenon that have shown up on 4 different moons since the Quiet Rapture, with enough research showing that the blood on all these moons come from humans for some reason, though it is unknown where the blood is coming from, nor how it stays a liquid even on these moons. The reason why this is so significant is due to the fact that moons have no such thing as clouds or even an atmosphere, so liquids will either evaporate immediately or freeze. A little scary to think about, but blood will turn into ice around -2 to -3 degrees Celsius. Space, however, is -270 degrees Celsius, a little bit colder than what is needed for liquids to turn into ice. What's interesting to note is that the ocean at Moon AT5 was a point of interest for a redacted reason. This moon is also owned by a faction called the COI. More on them later. From what we could tell from our gameplay before, there are creatures living within this ocean. Perhaps this is the reason why they went to investigate this specific ocean, but that could be wrong since we know nearly nothing about the other oceans at this point. What happens if we search up something about the moons though? It shows that the information is mostly redacted, with Moon Z8 being used for conviction realizations. Searching up conviction realizations next tells us this is a humane form of punishing criminals by causing them to do services in order to pay for their crimes, such as doing surveys, maintenance, or other tasks that benefit society, while also redacting some information that most likely is talking about some of the more violent offenders maybe going through executions, or the fact that this could be a ruse to cover up the fact that they're trying to do these suffocations within the submarines as a form of quote-unquote services. The next log that is important to talk about is the Quiet Rapture. Notably, nothing is really known about what exactly caused this to happen within 357 EIC, with these letters most likely meaning something similar to our own usage of BC or AD to record our history. Without any warning or signs of anything wrong with their home planet or even the universe as a whole, all communication with these planets were suddenly cut. For some reason, nobody, not a single soul, can recall having any kind of visual contact with any planet when this happened or experience any other unusual phenomena. Trying to contact other space stations revealed that every known planet with sentient life, flora, a habitable atmosphere, or any other sort of natural resources were completely gone, along with every known star. The only things now existing were the moons and asteroids. Many theories came from this incident, but ultimately, no answers. With how quickly it happened, and without any kind of warning, that is why many nicknamed this incident to be called the Quiet Rapture. You may have also noticed that in some of these logs, this COI has shown up quite a bit. Well, they are known as a constellation of Iron, which is a brotherhood of 3 space stations and 2 spacecrafts, which follows the principle of collectivism and is ruled by the popular vote of all citizens, which currently is 257 people at the time of that entry. Just remember this for later. Revealing another word for us to search up, Eden. Now, Eden is the largest man-made structure that still exists and was the main station for Mars. What's interesting to note is that this was not taken by the Quiet Rapture. We know that every planet that had life on it was taken away, but this specific space station was man-made and still had trees on it, which was not taken for some reason, making this very strange. The COI seemed to view Eden as a threat since they conducted an attack on Filament Station. Searching the station up shows that this was a 9-day battle between the COI and Eden, though the exact reason for this was not presented, with some of the information being redacted as well. Eden's troops would sabotage the station's reactor and cause it to become uninhabitable due to the extreme levels of radiation. With all the prisoners taken from this conflict going through the conviction realization that we mentioned before. So, what if our character was actually a soldier from Eden, but was taken by the COI as a prisoner of war? That would explain the silent executions they're trying to put out. Perhaps they're trying to slowly but systematically take out all of their political prisoners since they hold a personal grudge against them, while also not wanting to waste resources on those who they deem enemies. Without any new information to go off of, we go back and search up EIC to go further down this rabbit hole. These letters represent epochs of the interplanetary colonization. These are a lot of big words. With many debating on which calendar to use, since many on Mars decided to use the interstellar Martian calendar, which is the IMC. Simply put, one was based on the Earth's rotation around the Sun, while the other is obviously based on the Mars rotation around the Sun. You would think that Earth would have its own log, but it doesn't. So we can't really know what life on Earth really was like. However, Mars does have a log, which states that it was the most populated planet in the solar system before the Quiet Rapture happened, with the only thing left from Mars being the Eden space station. Trying to go further doesn't really lead anywhere. Though the COI already seemed to know about the monster somehow, since putting down monster leads to a redacted page. Nothing is presented here, just simply the words redacted. Why would this page be redacted in the first place if they didn't know about it? Almost like they're trying to cover it up for some reason. Good to know that even hundreds of years in the future, that we most likely will never be able to work together as a species. Now, for me to sound like a conspiracy theorist for the next few minutes, get those tinfoil hats on. We are going pretty deep for this. So, we know that these logs are created by the COI, and they claim to be a collectivism society, but I simply find that hard to believe. Mostly because most societies have a leader to function, so what I believe their society actually does is create little fake situations where they cause the masses to vote on certain issues to create the illusion of choice while the higher-ups control everything. Why do I think this though? 1. Their logs are mostly biased and redact a lot of information that they don't want the public to know about. No society that was truly based on collectivism would do this unless there was a shadow leader with a secret group that wanted to control the people. Just think about the situation. Mankind is effectively doomed. There are no planets to live off of, and the only life in the universe currently that we know of being the last few humans on these space stations, the blood oceans, and Eden's trees. Now, I'm not sure what kind of trees Eden has, or if they have some sort of garden as well to live off of. What we do know though is that Eden has the last form of vegetation in the whole universe. At least in the perspective of the COI. So, what the COI most likely wants to do is capitalize on the next best thing. Animals. Real living animals. Of course, they can't just admit that to the public, since if they did, what if Eden heard about it? We don't know what happened on the attack between the COI and Eden, but it could be potentially due to one group wanting some sort of resource from Filament Station. Even potentially being seeds, which is why Eden got access to those trees. Now, if Eden finds out that these pools of blood have access to fish and other wildlife, they would want to start another attack in order to gain a monopoly over them. Swinging backwards a little with the redacted information, there was also the rumors of suffocating convicts within submarines, which is what the note also warned us about, giving us even more reason to believe that the COI isn't actually as friendly as they try to seem, but rather an authoritarian regime that's pushing out false narratives and hiding information for their own benefit. I mean, executing prisoners of war seems kind of like what a dictator would try to do. Now, going into even more depth into finding out what exactly collectivism was revealed something much more unique. Communism. After finding this out, everything was fitting a lot better. The COI is a communist space station, specifically drawing a parallel with the USSR and Eden being similar to the United States during the Cold War. Think about it. They talk about the principle of unity and togetherness, something communism is known to advocate for. How their name also comes from the production of iron and steel materials, which is a weird fact to just put into the logs. I would automatically assume space stations are made of mostly with iron and steel, but to specifically state that within the logs was strange. This could be a stretch, but the Iron Curtain was a political boundary dividing Europe into two separate areas after the end of World War II, and would continue to exist until the end of the Cold War. This wasn't an actual wall or anything physical, but rather the Soviet Union blocking itself from making any kind of contact with countries within the West. This was basically to make itself dependent on its own resources and block any influence from any country that wasn't communist. Like I said, this part of the video is going to make me sound like a conspiracy theorist. Gave you the warning though. That doesn't change that the Soviet Union has committed quite a few war crimes and tried to cover it up. I tried finding out if there was some examples of them suffocating soldiers, either as a torture method or to put them down, but was unable to find anything about that personally. If you know anything about this subject and that does actually exist, please leave a comment down below and I'll try to research it even more. That still doesn't change the countless other war crimes that they did against others. Oh, and remember how I said Eden was supposed to represent the United States? They are quite literally defined by their patriotism and independence, the two defining factors of American culture. We even have a whole day dedicated to Independence Day. So let's explore the old logs, but with this new perspective. Let's just say that America, or the society representing America, colonized Mars. This could be seen as a society branching out from Earth, which I guess would be like Britain in this scenario, and choosing to colonize this new planet. Quite literally, the New World. Which, if you didn't have a history class or just don't remember, the New World was all of the Americas. People thought the Earth was flat and were too scared to venture that far west, so when someone did, and they didn't fall off the Earth somehow, they discovered that there were these new land masses that had an abundance of resources to colonize. European countries went crazy and wanted dibs on this quote-unquote New World. Now, we have Mars that most likely somehow amassed more power than Earth, since they grew their population to be larger. Kind of like the real world, how America started off as a British colony, but somehow turned into one of the most powerful countries in the entire globe. So now there are two main competing factions, simply being the COI and Eden. There could potentially be more than one, but none other are mentioned. These two are divided with their political beliefs, how they want to use a calendar since there are two main ways, the Earth rotation and the Mars rotation, and most likely a lot more. This tension would only get worse due to the quiet rapture, which limits how much resources are out in the universe. Also, the COI are very much suffering and seemingly starving, but I do not believe Eden is. At least, not as much as the COI. Yes, they don't have a planet to rely on, but they have trees and like I stated before, most likely also have some sort of garden as well, making sure they are able to be self-sustaining. The other reason why I also believe this is true is simply because there are larger numbers of people existing, almost being double, but this could just be due to their station at Eden being much larger. That is most of the logs explain and what they could possibly represent. A space representation of the Cold War. Except for that one moment where it got hot, but other than that, there appears to be some heavy tension still in the air, or heavy tension in space between them. Now, for one of the biggest questions in this game's lore, that we have absolutely no idea about. What was the Quiet Rapture? The in-game theories were either an actual religious rapture or some complicated quantum thing, blah blah, too complicated to know what that is. So, what do we know about this rapture? Honestly, not that much. Here's just a small list of what we actually know. Every single planet with a habitable atmosphere disappeared. This also includes every single star as well. If you look at the title screen of the game, you can notice that there are still stars in space, but those are dead stars. To explain that quickly, our sun is a star, and that sun's light takes about 8 minutes to reach the Earth. So if the sun disappeared, it would take about 8 minutes for us to really know it was gone. Now for stars that are trillions of light years away, it would take hundreds of years for them to completely disappear in our view, coating the universe with a dead light. Quite ominous, to be honest. The next thing to note is that the Quiet Rapture was something that was unexplained, which would make sense. This kind of incident would cause many questions to appear. What doesn't make sense is the fact that somehow not a single person witnessed what exactly caused this incident. Looking back in the logs once again, the wording is strange, stating, quote, "Nobody can recall having visual contact with any planets when this incident occurred, or experiencing any other unusual phenomena." Perhaps they actually did witness what happened, leading to a couple of theories for me. 1. This regime is hiding the truth of what actually happened, since these logs are based on a COI society. We don't know Eden's side at all, so Eden could possibly have stated what happened on their databases. We know that the COI most likely has a history of executing people, so they could have done this to anyone who they thought couldn't keep the truth hidden. This theory is mostly speculative and doesn't really have that much evidence to ground it. Now, the second theory is that somehow every single person who witnessed it lost their memory of the incident. If this is true, this leans more into a religious or supernatural answer to what exactly happened. And if it was one of those two, why weren't the people taken away from space stations as well? There was life on them and even planet life on Eden, but they still stayed intact. The speed of what happened is also important to know, as it was most likely nearly instant, which leads to one of the most plausible theories out there. On Steam, you could comment under some of the threads connected to the game. Trying to research some more things about the game led to a theory about parallel universes, specifically the transportation of space stations and moons. It would still be unexplained as to why this occurred, but this could be something to know, that instead of every single habitable planet disappearing, that if you change the perspective of the situation, maybe, just maybe, people on Mars and Earth saw the space stations and moons disappear instead. Or even, nothing has changed and for some reason they got cloned to exist in this parallel universe. So, for some reason, they got transported into this new universe. That would explain why the moons got transported with them instead of just disappearing, as well as the blood oceans forming on them. Something is going on, and these moons are most likely going to be the key to finding out what exactly is happening. Though, there isn't much we could go on. For the sake of this next theory, let's just say that the parallel universe theory was true, that the moons and space stations were actually transported. This next game isn't part of the Iron Lung universe at all, but some people have noticed that David, the creator of Iron Lung, also created a game called Dusk. This is a pixelated first-person shooter with a completely different story. However, what's interesting to some people is the fact that this game is about cultists. What if some of these blood moons are related to some sort of cult ritual, and the whole reason this new parallel universe exists is because of them as well? This is completely speculation, but it's fun to think about. So, after all that, what could we conclude? Nothing much, honestly. We have read so many of these logs, tried to fit all the pieces together, but we still cannot say for certain that anything we said was really true. All we could do is create theories of what happened. Without the theories, what we do know is this. Earth became able to send out people to space, which caused them to colonize Mars, which would grow to be one of the most populated planets in the whole solar system. With these two planets came space stations, and these space stations would create alliances that would go against each other. Most notably, the COI and Eden. For some reason, the Quiet Rapture happens, which only escalates tension between these two factions. With the lack of resources and tensions rising, an attack against Filament Station begins, which spans on for 9 days. After this, blood oceans began to appear on 4 different moons. The reason as to why is again unknown, but it is known that they started using prisoners of war and convicts to undergo conviction realizations for the good of society, sending them basically on death missions into the depths of these oceans in order to find out what is actually there. At first, it seems like a desperate attempt to find any new resources, but they find something. We don't know what exactly it is though. It could be the sea monsters that they view as a potential food source, or something different. But we do know that they became interested within this specific ocean, and they sent us into the Iron Lung, where we would end up getting eaten by some sort of creature. Oh my god. And that was only with the logs. Out of this small 1-hour game, all of this was presented. I personally am hoping that this lore gets expanded upon, whether it's due to a new game, an update with even more logs, or even within the whole movie that's set to be released, though the actual release date is still unknown, at least at the time of recording this video. I know I won't be able to spark the same amount of excitement for this game as much as the millions of people that Markiplier reached, but hopefully, I got to make at least one person excited to see the story to be expanded upon. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, first of all, thank you. It really means a lot that you watched all the way through. It's been quite a journey reading all these logs and checking this game out once again after so long. And 2, how are you still sane after getting all that information? Oh my god. If I didn't make it clear enough, I hate this game because it abuses my fear of the ocean and claustrophobia to create a genuinely terrifying experience. Since it made my own anxiety spike up, you should also hate it. Hopefully, you enjoyed this short dive into the lore and gameplay of what Iron Lung was about. In the meantime, I'm tired for talking for that long, so I'm going to take a nap. Peace.